This is Deb Moore, the Stories of Your Life and the Veterans History Project through Grand Valley State University. I'm talking with Mort Hoffman today. Is May 4th, 2015. And thanks for talking to me today, Mort. Is Mort your given name, or is it something longer?
No, Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N,
Okay,
is on my social security and so on.
okay. Okay, and tell me a little bit about when and where you were born, and a little bit about your mom and dad and any siblings.
Born in Rochester, New York, the home of Bao Shalom and Eastman Kodak
Okay,
and Xerox, and went to grade school there, of course, and George Washington High School and Ben Franklin High School. And after graduation in June of 1944, I enlisted in the Navy. And I then attended boot camp at Sampson Naval Base in Geneva, New York, about 100 miles from Rochester.
what appealed to you about the Navy?
Well, a lot of my high school friends joined the Navy at the same time. And I was in the New York National Guard for 2 years before that, from 1942 to 1944. And I got tired of trudging around with a pack on my back. I figured I'd join the Navy and see the world. Of course, the war was already going on, pretty heavy. And, that was the thing to do. I mean, you had to serve your country in those days because what happened in Europe with the Holocaust and what was happening at that time with Germany overtaking most of Europe and so on, and the Russians, same way. My mother and father were both born in Europe. My mother in the Ukraine, in a town called Poltava, and my dad in Belarus, White Russia, born in a town called Smorgon. And I had the honor of visiting that town back in 1996. My wife and I went to see our roots, or
Nice.
find our roots rather. And I found the street that my dad was born on, and the river where my grandfather had a flour mill, and there were 7 thatched roofs, huts like, or dwellings, with trying to think,
Yes. The
a
grinder?
well, a well
A
in the
well.
front yard. And I called I had one uncle that was still alive at the time. He was 7 years old when he left. My dad was in the Russian army during World War I. And his unit was overrun by the Germans at that time. And so he went back home, the family is gone, and he went across Siberia into Yokohama, Japan, stayed there for a couple nights, and then got on a tramp steamer and came back to San Francisco and into Rochester, New York, where he had a couple brothers already. But anyway,
So he really deserted?
oh no,
No.
his unit was overrun.
Oh, okay,
The
okay.
unit was overrun, they got defeated. Anyway, I called my uncle and said, Uncle Jack, I found Belarus, that was the name of the street, the road to Belarus. And I said, I found these 7 thatched huts with a well in the front yard. And he starts screaming, we had a well in the front yard, and so on. And there was a gal that lived next door to our family, my dad's family, who kept up the association over the years. She and her husband moved to Denora, Pennsylvania,
Uh-huh.
and they ran a company store there, and we kept up the association over those years. So anyway,
Great.
from Sampson Naval Base, I went out to California to Camp Parks for overseas assignment, and then had week leave, so hopped a train back to Rochester and ended up spending a week with my family and been back to California. Ended up in a naval hospital with catarrhal fever, which kept me incapacitated for a couple of weeks. My outfit got shipped out and they went to the Marianas, the South Pacific. And then a couple of weeks later, I got assigned to another unit. And on December 7th, 1944, we were on a ship bound, the SS Carl Schurz, bound for Adak and the Aleutian Islands. Made one stop at Kodiak, which I tried to visit again several years ago, but it was turned over to a fishing village there, the Aleut Indians. And I spent 2 years on that island.
Wow. Let me stop you there and go back a little bit more. You said you were in the National Guard. Was that as a high school student?
Yeah,
How old did you have to be to join?
16.
And what did you do during those 2 years with the National Guard?
Well, we took training, aren't like basic training for the Army. And
Marching, drilling?
yeah, firing, went to Camp Peekskill to maneuvers and so on.
And so, again, that was not unusual then because of the war?
Oh no, several of my friends were in the Guard, at the high school friends.
Did you get paid at that time?
I don't even remember.
Okay. So.
Yeah, we got something, I forgot what it was. It's a
Okay.
long time ago, you're going back 70 some odd years.
Right. So anyway, well, they would have probably taken you in the Navy anyway, but did that service in the National Guard get you a leg up or anything?
Yeah, I think so, as far as drills and so on, and weapons to some extent and so on. Fire squadron drills and so on.
And what about basic training? That was 6 weeks?
12 weeks.
12 weeks. And what'd you do there?
Marched a lot.
Uh-huh.
We had Lake Geneva was a pretty good sized lake, and we went out and whaleboat drills and so on. Marched more, some more.
Right. Was it a big adjustment for you, or were you in pretty good shape by that time anyway?
I was in good shape.
Uh-huh.
Weighed 138 pounds soaking wet.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you didn't have any trouble with basic training?
No,
What about the discipline? Were they always screaming at you like
Well,
you hear? Or?
that's military for you. There's always discipline. You had to obey the rules and abide by whatever, went on. So,
So it wasn't that much of an adjustment.
not really.
Okay. And so what was your unit and division?
In boot camp,
Well, I don't know. Is there a difference?
yeah, it was just, we had 144 men in the barracks
Okay.
and went through the 12 weeks of training. We couldn't leave the base for the first 12 weeks. Fortunately, it was only a couple-hour drive from Rochester, so my parents came to visit us after the first 4 weeks they were allowed to visit, and brought goodies, a lot better than a mess hall.
So at that point, did they give you any aptitude tests or to test you to see what you would specialize in?
Well, they did want to know what you did in civilian life, and of course I was in high school, but I had worked at a auto parts store, similar to Western Auto, or if you're familiar with that, or AutoZone, something like that. And I did a lot of work with batteries, installing batteries in a car, charging them, and so on and so forth. Had a lot of practice putting bikes together and kids' toys and so on. So anyway, I just mentioned that when they asked for any type of work that I had done. And so I ended up in the Seabees.
Okay, tell me about the Seabees then. How is that
The
different?
Seabees were founded in 1942, and what they are is the Navy's version of the Army Corps of Engineers. And they did all kinds of construction work and built a lot of landing docks and so on to let the troops that are invading different islands or places to get ashore and so on. Blew up a lot of mine fields, or not minefields, but things that the enemy had put down to thwart the ships coming in, or the whale boats coming in, or the landing craft coming in, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So my outfit, at first, we constructed a spare parts depot for all the military vehicles on the base.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we were part of a battalion, 114th NCB, Naval Construction Battalion. And they had been assigned to that island to do work for the Navy portion of it. There was an Army side and Navy side. And they maintained all the refrigerating units, did all the maintenance work for the mess hall and other various, the hospital, the sick bay and so on. And the other thing that they did, which was quite an accomplishment, there was a landing strip that the Army Corps of Engineers had been working on for quite some time. And they had to land planes within 9 days, and they gave up. So they called the Seabees in, and we finished it in 9 days. Used some very unorthodox methods to do it, but our commanding officer was from North Carolina, and he said, I don't care what you do, but get it done by such and such a date. And we were laying those landing strips, you know, that
Interlocked?
perforated metal strips
Okay.
that I think were 10 or 12 feet long. And they're about 18 inches wide, and they hooked into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept this was on tundra,
Mm-hmm.
which is predominant soil, the type of soil in the Aleutians. That's almost like a quicksand.
Okay.
And so we had to put a base down there. We piled in gravel, we put in oil drums that were empty and so on. We put in truck beds from dump trucks and filled them with gravel and put it throughout the landing field area. And then we filled that all up with sand and heavy soil, and then put these landing strips down. And on the 9th day, they were landing planes,
My,
big
wow.
cargo planes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet your commanding officer was proud. Proud. You are all proud of it, huh?
Yep.
Wow. So you were well suited for this work, Mort.
Didn't have any choice. No, we got along good. We did well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't work on that particular phase of what the 114th had done, but we were support as far as the vehicles and so on are concerned.
Okay.
We did maintain the refrigerating units, which kept all the food, especially for the officers' mess. And that was about it. Now, in early 1945, we were assigned to the Marine Squadron on Adak, and we took training with them.
Mm-hmm.
I was the smallest guy in the outfit at 138 pounds, and I had the biggest weapon. I had a Browning automatic that weighed 19 pounds, and all these big kids from North Carolina and so on were carrying a 7-pound carbine, and we were trudging through the tundra and so on, and you go sinking that up to your knees, you know, when it was, depending on what time of the year it was or how much rain or snow had melted and so on. We had about 1 month of summer, August. And it got down to 55 below one night when we bivouacked out.
Oh,
We were in sleeping bags. So anyway, went through that, and they were assembling a fleet to go into northern Japan, Hokkaido. And there was British ships, Russian ships, and Canadian ships together with the US ships, and the US ships were gonna lead the assault and so on. And they were gonna bring troops on, and then they dropped the bomb, and everything was over at that point, so. And then the rest of the time was just maintenance. We just got lazy doing practically nothing for another year. And back in early July
This is 46 now?
46,
Uh-huh.
after the war was over, we flew back to the States,
Oh,
made one landing in Seattle, and then took a troop train back.
back home to Rochester?
Lido Beach, Long Island, where they wined you and dined you. You
Nice.
had your private room, swimming pool here. They served your breakfast at your room if you wanted, or you could go and have sit-down meals, not go through a line with your tray. And the obvious reason for all this is they wanted you to re-enlist.
Ah, I was gonna say, what's this?
But not too many of us did. They offered us a higher rank and so on.
Because by this time you'd been in for 2 years?
Yeah,
Okay, and the war was over, like you said, and
Yeah.
so you could be done if you wanted.
yeah, which I chose to do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what was the name of your ship again?
I didn't have, the ship I went over on,
No, the ship that you were stationed on for most of
the
the,
island. We was on an island.
you were on an
Adak.
island, okay,
ADAK,
okay,
it's on there.
okay, so you didn't sleep in a ship?
Oh, no,
No,
except coming over,
okay,
yeah.
but you had barracks, regular barracks
Oh, we
there,
had Quonset huts.
okay? Okay. So would you say that, your unit then was really, a support unit? Yeah, I mean, you didn't do any fighting,
No, there was
No.
no fighting there.
uh-huh,
This is a terrible picture. But I'm sitting on top of a Quonset hut, and the snow was about 9 feet high.
wow,
We had what we call the willow wall. It was a big storm.
yeah,
It happened after they had a typhoon down near Hawaii,
okay,
and then it came north. And we had to use a buddy system. You couldn't leave anywhere unless you had somebody else with you. And they put up rope lines to help you get to the head, the bathrooms and so on. And
so you wouldn't get lost?
well, you wouldn't get stuck in the snow or anything like that by yourself.
Wow,
It was really, it had 107-mile-an-hour winds.
wow, how long did that last for?
Couple days. Couple days, yeah.
And now, did you have clothing for this? Was your clothing appropriate?
Oh yeah, we had foul weather gear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Tell me about foul weather gear, what did that consist of?
Well, heavy jackets, insulated jackets, and fur lined and so on. In fact, they were so good that the Army, fellas we knew over in the Army side of the island, wanted them so bad they trade us their beer ration for them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, wow,
Depending on how cold it was, you could get more cases of beer for one jacket. If it was just mediocre weather, you could only get a couple cases.
So, so your normal shift was working 8 hours if there wasn't a special project?
Yeah.
And then
roughly.
what would you do the rest of the time?
Well, we had a theater there,
Uh-huh,
which we built. We had beer halls that we went to. Had recreation places where, they had pool tables and so on, shuffleboard. Mostly pool tables. That was about it.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Slept a lot.
Slept a lot, okay. Was that from boredom or,
No, just to relax a little bit.
yeah, 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 and was there any alcohol abuse or drug abuse or anything like that?
No drug abuse that I knew of. And beer muster, you could only get 2 cans at a time, and it was only for an hour, so you had to drink pretty fast.
Okay, so all that time, you said after basic training, you got to go home and visit your family for a week. Then you didn't see them for 2 years?
That's right,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
My folks and I corresponded almost on a daily basis for all that time.
wow,
And then the local gas and electric company uh, had a setup where they sealed cans, like cans of soup and so on and so forth, only you could put anything you wanted into a can. So my folks sent me things like corned beef and cookies and cake and so on, sealed in these cans. And that was a treat, compared to what we got, Spam or whatever. Scrambled eggs that were green. They were made from powder.
yeah,
Yeah,
not too appetizing,
yeah.
yeah,
And going back to when they had assembled that fleet consisting of all the different countries going in on northern Japan, we visited with the Russians. They came to our Quonset hut, and they came to Burmester, of course, and the Canadians and the English and so on. It was
it was
quite
nice,
different, yeah,
uh-huh,
yeah.
uh-huh. And how did you communicate with the Russians?
They knew a little bit of English.
Did they?
I knew a little bit of Russian, not a lot, because of my parents.
Yeah,
But it was tougher communicating with the English because they got that Cockney accent and so on. It's hard.
Right.
Talk so fast, it's hard to understand them.
that's funny. So you said you lived in Quonset huts.
Yeah.
About how many guys would be in one of those?
There were 16 in a Quonset hut.
Mm-hmm.
We had double bunks, and we also 3 of us got together and we had a 10 by 10 tent, and we insulated the inside of it, the walls and so on, and we got single beds. Went around except for the doorway, entryway. And then we cut a hole in the floor and put a box in there, and that kept all our food. We got extra food from the refrigerators that we serviced,
Uh-huh.
and we kept our food in there, eggs and meat and so on and so forth. And
That was clever.
yeah, well,
So you cooked some of your own food?
on this oil stove,
Okay, okay,
yeah,
great. And there was no problem with that? You didn't
No.
have to?
uh-uh,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Interesting. So who would you say your best buddies were that you made in the?
Oh, I had a lot of friends there. In fact, last year, we were coming, I still do work for the Navy, and we were in Annapolis, and we were coming back through Pennsylvania. And I called a fellow that used to work for me. He was in Northumberland, and we stopped to visit him for a while. And then I stopped in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and called one of my former shipmates, not shipmate, but mates from the Seabees, Leon Erdl. And we did correspond for quite some time after we both got out. Williamsport, Pennsylvania,
Okay,
where they have the Little League baseball
yeah.
playoffs. Anyway, and we talked for a while and so on, and I called him again at Christmas time, I guess, to say hi. So that's
nice.
our outfit never had a reunion. A lot of
Yeah,
different outfits have a reunion. I keep looking, and I get a magazine from the AMVETS. I went to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa.
okay. After you got out?
Yeah, about 6 months after I got out, started in January. And got involved with the AMVETS. My one roommate was a service officer for the AMVETS. And he was in the Army, landed on Sicily, and then landed in the Anzio beachhead. And we visited there. I kind of digress a little bit here. But we visited Anzio, my wife and I, when we were in Italy 3 years ago. And talked to a fellow there. He says, "Where are you from in the States?" And I said, "I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan." He says, "Oh, you know Peter Sekema?" Sekia? I says, "I happen to know him because the fellow that worked for me, I worked at Hush Puppy for 15 years.
Okay.
And the fellow that worked for me there was Italian-American, and he and Sekia both belonged to the Italian-American group. So I called him after I got back and I said, "Peter Sekia, I bring you regards from this fellow." I don't have his name memorized. He said, "Oh my goodness." And right north of Anzio is one of the Southern American cemeteries for veterans of World War II. And it's really mind-boggling
Wow. It's hard
to
to
go
see.
through it.
Uh,
My roommate, he lived and slept with his helmet, did everything, drank out of his helmet and so on, for 30 days while they were on the beachhead in Sicily and in Anzio. And he died at 48 from cancer of the appendix.
That's something, boy.
I still, in fact, on this honor flight, we'll probably see his 4 boys. They live in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
area.
good.
Yeah,
Oh, that'll be nice.
yeah.
That'll be nice. Now, Mort, you said something about you still do some work for the Navy. What is that?
Well, I am a civilian contractor, and what I do is, because of my shoe background, when I was at Wolverine Hush Puppy, I was doing leasing of specialty stores for them. We opened up 128 Hush Puppy specialty stores around the country.
Okay.
And I also worked with people from our foreign distributors and so on, South America, Europe and so on. And a fellow by the name of Tom Pipp used to have Sherwin shoes here. I don't know if you remember that or not. Came into my office one time and he said, "I want to show you something that might be of use to you." And they did mobile shelving like you see in doctors' offices and lawyers' offices, where they store things on these shelves and they move back and forth. And the cost of rent in the malls at that time was getting out of sight. So if you had 1,000 square foot room, you had to do X number of dollars in order to make the business worthwhile. And we had an opportunity to go into a small center court location, 660 square feet in Charleston, South Carolina, in a downtown mall. And so we experimented with this, and we had enough stock storage space for the footwear in a smaller space that we could do with permanent shelving to get as much shoe stock in there as if we had 1,000 square foot.
Wow.
And it proved to be a very successful endeavor, and we use that in several places. And I've done work after I got out of, after I left Hush Puppy, I did work for them too in some of their own stores.
Okay.
And just, let's see, 2 months ago, I finished my 37th job for the Navy at Little Creek in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. Not Norfolk, it's Virginia Beach, actually.
Okay.
That's the SEAL base. And I'd done, my wife goes with me on all these trips.
And you do these units, these?
Yeah, I have an installer and then I hire labor ready or manpower or something like that to finish up. And we've been to Japan 3 times, Italy twice, and Spain once.
Wow.
And I didn't do these jobs in person, but I did jobs in Iceland and in England. So I got to see the world, and I wasn't even directly in the Navy this time.
That's great. That's great. Mort, tell me, what was the morale like in your unit?
Oh, morale was fine, you know. Everybody knew they had a job to do, and if you enlisted or you got drafted, whatever, didn't make any difference because you were gonna be there for the duration.
But there were no casualties in your unit.
We had 1 casualty.
What was that?
A fella, unfortunately, was getting ready to be discharged, and his first wife found out about his second wife. And so he drank some duplicating fluid.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the
Aw.
only casualty.
that's awful.
Well, I mean, we had injuries, you know, at our workstations and so on, but
Yeah,
other than that,
yeah. And you said you exchanged daily letters with your parents. Anybody else that you wrote to?
let's see, my brother, well, the family all corresponded. You know, my folks are my brother and my sister.
They shared.
My brother is 5 years younger than I was. He ended up in the Marines in the Korean conflict.
Okay.
And my sister, he passed away several years ago, 53 years old.
Boy.
He was one of 10 engineers that worked on a color copier for Xerox, and 7 out of the 10 died of cancer. Yeah.
Wow. That's
So-
not good. That's not good. Did you have any interactions with the native peoples on Adak, or weren't there any?
The only living thing on Adak were blue foxes,
Uh-huh.
and a couple trappers had set up a blue fox colony. Now, we used to catch salmon and king crab. You could just walk out almost and gaff a salmon when they were running, you know.
Yeah.
But now, when I tried to go back there several years ago, my brother-in-law was still alive, my sister and I, and my wife took a trip to Alaska. And we, at that time, stopped in Kodiak, and I tried to find out about getting over to Adak, and there was one airline that went there twice a week, but they went out of business.
Oh.
So we didn't go there, but Kodiak was very similar, a little warmer, of course, and we were there during the summer. So we did some fishing and sightseeing and so on, and they had a World War II museum, because the Japanese submarine had surfaced right off the coast of Kodiak. And so right now the Navy gave up their base. Army had given that up a long time ago. So the island is was turned over to Aleut Indians, who are American citizens. And they have a fishing village there, king crab and salmon.
And everybody leaves the blue fox alone?
I don't even know about them anymore.
Did you ever have any entertainment, any USO
Yes.
talent come?
I saw Eleanor Roosevelt. I saw Franklin Roosevelt. Don Amici. Another movie star. And then Phil Spitalny and his all-girl orchestra came over to do a concert for us. And one of the girls in the orchestra went to high school with me. And I was in the Master at Arms shack at that time. And so I got my way on a bus with all the orchestra and got to go to dinner with them and so on at the officers' mess. So that was Tyrone Power was another one, came through with a USO show.
Nice. Oh, that was fun. And now, how many guys were there on the Adak, on Adak?
I don't know,
I mean,
Army,
hundreds of you?
oh yeah, thousands,
Thousands of you?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah,
So,
low thousands.
well, thousands, okay, okay.
And ships came in periodically, not only bringing supplies, but to refuel and so on.
Mhm.
And we had, across the bay was Army Air Force Base, and they did patrols all the time.
Mhm.
So it was very, I guess, active type
Right.
of a base.
So, just, with the exception of the weather, everything was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were discharged then after you turned them down to re-enlist? Then you went home to Rochester? Okay, then you tell me then about enrolling under the GI Bill at Drake?
Yeah, well, during the summer that after I was discharged, I worked for a local gas and electric company doing construction work. And several of my high school friends had gone to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, and came back on one of the holidays and told us it wasn't crowded like all the universities or colleges were in the East and Midwest. I had applied to Chicago, University of Illinois in Chicago, and at the Navy Pier, and another college down in Florida, and Syracuse University in New York. But they all had large classes and large study halls and so on. And the classes at Drake were like 30 in a classroom. And I majored in marketing and accounting and so on. And that's how I got started in the shoe business. I worked part-time at an Edison Brothers store. And from there, I went to work for a store called the New Utica in the leased shoe department, run by Midland Shoe Company out of St. Louis, Missouri. And I got to be the manager of that shoe department. And 10 years after being there, about 10 years after I graduated Drake, I worked on my master's in night school, but got to the point where I either had to accept the transfer to St. Louis or stay there and write my master's. I only had 3 hours to go for my master's. I had to write a thesis. So I chose to go into St. Louis and got married 3 months after. Married an Iowa gal who you met.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we moved to St. Louis in 1958 when we got married. I worked there worked for Midland Shoe Company for a total of 23 years.
Wow.
And then went to work for Wool Shoe Company, who was part of Brown Group. Brown Shoe Company made Naturalizer women's shoes and probably men's and Buster Brown children's. Prior to that, when working for Midland, I was a supervisor for 7 states. We had lease departments in those states. Then I developed the Western Territories for them, starting in Utah and going down to Vegas and so on and so forth. And then when I worked for Wool, I did their program with the Fanfare Division, which were specialty stores run by independent owner-operators. And that's what I did at Hush Puppy here.
Okay.
Opened up 128 stores for them.
Wow. And so so the GI Bill paid for your 4 years of college and your master's?
Yeah,
I mean,
but I didn't get my master's.
you were 3 hours short and you didn't do
I
it.
had 27 hours in.
Did you ever regret that?
I thought about going back and doing it, but
Yeah,
you know, get involved and moving,
right, getting married.
yeah.
And so you didn't have, it doesn't sound like you had much of a transition from military to civilian life?
Oh, it's quite a transition.
Was it? Tell me
yeah.
about that.
Well, you didn't have to take orders all the time, except, you know, your boss. When I was a supervisor, I only had to report to one boss.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a manager in the shoe department, the only ones I had to correspond with St. Louis, but I did my own payrolls and so on and so forth, so I ran the shoe department.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so you're saying you thought it was less stressful in civilian life than military life?
Well, I wouldn't say less stressful, you had the stress of maintaining the business and so on, and producing for your company and so on, but no, you roll with the punches.
Okay, okay. So you didn't end up with any physical or psychological trauma or anything from your military?
Not that I'm aware of. You can ask my wife, she might tell you different.
When you were in the Adak, were you aware of the scope of the war and how the war was going?
Oh, yes,
Okay,
yeah,
they kept you fully apprised of
oh,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so now you said you do belong to the AMVETS?
I'm a life member.
Okay,
I went up through the ranks, I became post commander, and then I held a state office in Iowa at the same time.
mm-hmm,
And I still get their monthly magazine and
mm-hmm.
solicitations for donations and so on.
Yeah, yeah. And whose responsibility would it be to have a reunion for your group? Just
Oh,
one of the guys would have
yeah,
to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, the AMVETS doesn't do
No,
any of that?
No.
Okay,
Mm-mm.
okay.
I've been to several AMVET conventions, but that's not the same as having your own unit.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But still, you enjoy doing that, going to the conventions?
I did a lot when I was still in Iowa, you know,
Uh-huh,
but I haven't gone to any since.
okay, okay.
In fact, I came here from Des Moines one time with a group. We stayed at the Pantlin Hotel
Uh-huh,
for an AMVET convention.
okay, okay.
And then when we were in St. Louis, we had a convention there, and of course I was there, so I got involved with that convention. Had some of the guys from Iowa over to the house and so on, or
Oh.
our apartment at that time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so you had how many children?
So we have just one daughter.
One daughter, and then you moved obviously to Grand Rapids when you got the job with Hush Puppy.
Yeah,
Okay, what year was that?
that was in 1976.
1976. Okay, okay. So when you look back on your military experience, what do you think were some of the positives of your time in the Navy?
Oh, camaraderie with the other people in my group, in my unit. Thinking positively about what contributions we could make to the war effort and so on. We thought we were doing our share. And I told you about being in Japan 3 times. It was a little difficult at first going over there the first time.
Mm-hmm. How come?
Well, you know, I thought about what happened during the war and the atrocities and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were just down the waterways from us was Attu and Kiska, and the Japs had landed on those 2 islands. And there were battles there between the Americans and the Canadians and the Japanese. They finally overran them, but there were still some up in the hills. One of them sneaked into a mess hall one time. He got American uniform somehow, pulled his cap over his head and got in the mess hall because he was hungry.
Wow.
And somebody told him to take his cap off at the table, and he didn't do anything, you know, he didn't understand what they were saying. So another guy went over and pulled his cap off, and there he was.
Wow.
So he ended up in a brig.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, at least he was fed.
Yeah, yeah.
did you feel like you learned any good skills in the Navy that you might not have gotten elsewhere?
Yeah, some,
Some.
yeah. I learned how to get along with a lot of different types of individuals,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and learned that you gotta help each other.
mm-hmm,
You can't do some of these jobs by yourself, you need assistance and so on.
mm-hmm. Any negatives?
Not really, not really. There was a couple people that, this was in boot camp though, that had a couple guys beat me up because of my religion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But other than that, no negatives.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Were there any repercussions for them?
No,
Uh-huh.
No.
So, from that, you just learned to stay away from them, or?
no, they didn't bother me anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's too bad.
I fixed them though, because when my folks brought stuff when they came to visit us, we went and didn't take it back to our barracks. We went down we had kind of a culvert back of our barracks, and my other friends and I sat there and ate all the goodies and didn't invite them.
But they found out about it.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Nobody squealed.
So for the most part, you think people were pretty accepting of you being Jewish, or didn't care,
Yeah, for the
or
most part.
not for the most part?
For the most part, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we did, for example, on the religious holidays that were not Jewish holidays, we took turns standing guard or whatever at the barracks or different places. Just like they do here, we used to volunteer for East Grand Rapids Police Department on the holidays to go with them, so some of them could take off and enjoy
That
a
was nice,
holiday with their family.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took turns for us when we had our holidays, so.
That was nice. That was
Yeah.
nice. Did you see any prejudice toward any other group?
Not really, not really. We did not have any, we had some Navajo Indians, had 3 Navajo Indians in our outfit from New Mexico. And New Mexico or Arizona, I'm not sure which. One of them's parents died and they couldn't get leave to go home. But the thing that got to us was the fact that some of the officers, like the dentists and the doctors, got to go over to Seattle every couple of months or so on.
Not quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see here you got the American Theater Medal, the Victory Medal, and the Asiatic Pacific Medal.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to see them?
Sure. Hold them up here for the camera. Okay. Now hold that one
That's
up.
a victory medal for World War II.
This one is?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. And this one is the Asiatic Pacific
Right.
Medal. Doesn't look like you ever took them out of the plastic, Mort.
Well, I tell you what, I had my original ribbons, I never had these medals. And so I wrote to Senator Levin at the time,
Uh-huh.
and he was kind enough to get these for me.
Nice, and this is the American Theater Medal.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, that was nice. Great. Anything else you want to say about your time in the military that,
No,
anything I
it
didn't
was
ask
a
you about?
worthwhile experience. And I feel grateful that I came through it okay. I think about some of them, you know, had some high school friends that didn't make it,
Yeah,
but other than that,
yeah.
you know, it's an experience. I think everybody should go through it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you are looking forward to the Spirit of Grand Rapids trip on May 16th. You're going to Washington DC to the World
Right.
War II Memorial.
Right,
Okay, so that's a full day?
that's what I understand.
Uh-huh.
Leave at 5:30, get back about 9:30.
Okay, and your daughter's gonna be your companion,
She's gonna be my guardian.
your guardian, okay? Okay. And they're flying you private jet
I
or
guess so.
commercial? You're not sure?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you ever get in touch with Morris Kleiman?
I didn't know.
Oh, okay. He was one of the first to go.
Oh, he's your friend you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, he belongs to our congregation
Uh-huh.
there. He was in a battle of the Bulge. And I still think it would be worthwhile if you got someone to get he and this fellow that met in England when he was in the hospital
Oh,
there,
yeah,
45, to do a story on him.
yeah,
Maybe get him on one of the TV stations.
okay. And
I've been trying.
is Mort going on the trip on the 16th?
No, he's already
No.
gone.
Oh, he's gone,
Morris,
okay,
yeah.
Morris, okay, okay. Well, thank you for your service and thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you for allowing me to do it.
Sure.